Alright, in this video we're going to take a look at the actual brush functionality that we have here. So if you're wondering about how this interface was created, you're going to have to go back one video and take a look at the video that was created on how to make a custom interface and also how to set up custom hotkeys. Okay, in earlier videos we also talked about subdivision levels, so I'm going to add more divisions to this model just so we can kind of tell exactly what's going on with this with these brushes as we use them. So I'm going to hit Control D, which is the hotkey for going right here and dividing the mesh. I'm not going to go any higher than this. I know we can see some individual polygons here, but that's okay. Not a big deal. First brush we're going to start with is the standard brush. So if I go ahead and click on this brush, we can find it here in this custom interface that we made, or we can always go tap B and then type the first letter of the name of that brush, so S for standard, and you should be able to find it within here. So I know there's a lot of brushes with inside a ZBrush, but it's pretty easy to kind of roughly remember what the name of the brush is and then find it within this big trough here. So we got the standard brush, and I've got symmetry turned on, so I tapped X for that. Z add is on for this, and if I make my brush size a little bit smaller, just tap S, just tap, and then you can drag this. Do not hold down S because it kind of freaks out a little bit. So just tap S, and then you got that slider, and here we go here. So Z add, if I just sculpt, it's going to raise the surface up, and if I put it on Z sub, it's going to take away, right? So we should know that. I'm going to put it back on Z add. So the next part is we're just sculpting on here, right? And if we hold down Alt, that's going to enable Z sub and override the positive sculpt and give us negative. Okay, so that's the hotkey for that. If we draw on here, and if we hold down Shift, it will turn our brush into the smooth brush. Okay, so we can smooth things out. So that's the basic premise of you sculpting with any of these brushes. For the most part, is going to be you building up a surface, maybe knocking the surface back in certain areas, and then smoothing out those results a little bit. Now, something else to kind of keep in mind is that if we have a lot of subdivision levels, so yeah, I can't even see polygons anymore because I just added another subdivision level, and we put some detail on here and we smooth, you can see it takes a little while for it to kind of melt that surface back away, right? But if we're at a lower subdivision level, so I'm going to drop this thing down, and we smooth, you can see how fast it kind of melts that surface away. So it's just something to keep in mind that as you're at a lower subdivision level, the smooth brush is going to have a greater effect than if you're at a higher subdivision level. And it takes a little bit longer, and you don't have to press quite as hard at the lower subdivision levels as you do the higher subdivision levels. Okay, and that kind of functionality is going to work kind of across the board for all these different brushes. So the standard brush is just going to build you up this kind of this shape that you see here like this and have this type of fall off. So I kind of very rarely use the standard brush anymore. I just use it in certain cases. If I want to pump up a surface, I might make my brush size pretty large and pull it out here. And you might notice this little red line following it. That's the lazy mouse. So the functionality on that, if you go to stroke and then click this to dock it over here, there's also there's some stroke information associated with your brush. So lazy mouse does this kind of cool thing. If we have a little brush like this, and we turn lazy mouse on, which is on, and we drag this thing, you can see there's that little red line behind it. It's actually taking our mouse points or your tablet inputs, and it's kind of smoothing that out. So to see that to greater effect, you can take the lazy steps down to something really small, and then the lazy radius, if we drag that up pretty high, now you can see that line starting to grow like that. And if we pump that up even further, you can see how the brush lags behind that line there. But it does make it pretty easy to get some very specific stroke qualities. So if you're doing something, you know, like a mech kind of lining or something to that effect, it does make it a bit easier to actually draw very kind of specific strokes that go along a pattern. So it might be something that you're gonna kind of have to try out and kind of get used to, like this. Okay, so that's a possibility for this. And as you can see, when I drew this out, still not enough subdivision levels to really kind of support what I'm doing with that. So on there, if we just divide it one more time, now you can see the kind of quality that we're getting from that stroke. So that's you know, the whole thing with your subdivisions. You're gonna have to kind of understand what level of polygons, how many polygons that you're really going to need in your model to get the kind of quality that you're going for, right? And like I was saying in an earlier video, you really should be working in stages. So this fine kind of detailing stuff should be held for the later stages in the sculpt. But I'm just showing you the functionality. So, and if you want to turn lazy mouse off, you can click here, or the hotkey for that is L. So you can turn on and off lazy mouse. And I put this in my custom interface so you can see this, and I like to have this lazy step, lazy smooth, and lazy radius in my custom interface as well, just to make it a lot easier to get to those things without having to load up the stroke menu. Because a lot of these different brushes, the lazy mouse could either come in handy, or it might make the functionality not so great. So you want to turn that stuff on and off. Okay, so there's the standard brush. I guess there's one other thing I can talk about that would integrate well with the standard brush, and that would be masking. So if you hold down Control, you can draw at any point a mask on your 3D model like this. So say we wanted this kind of shape like this for the chest, and let's say we want to tighten up that mask. If we hold down Control and Alt and click on it, you can see how it sharpens the mask. I'm going to hit undo like this. And if we want to smooth the mask, we can hold down Control and click on it. So again, there's two different functionalities. If you want to sharpen a mask, hold down Control and Alt and click on a mask that's already drawn, and it'll sharpen it up. Or if you want to smooth it out, you can hold down Control and click on it, and it smooths out that mask like that. So I'm going to get it back to where it was kind of hard edge like this. If you want the inverse of that mask, you can hit Control I like this, or you can just drag, sorry, not drag, you can just click in the open viewport and it'll give you the inverse of that mask. So there's different ways to get to this functionality in here, and if you want to get rid of the mask altogether, just hold on Control and drag in the open viewport, and that'll get rid of it. Another thing is, if you hold down Control and you drag in the open viewport, you can drag out a square shape from here, and I have symmetry on, so that's why we're getting this here. And if you drag out from here like this, what we're doing, and if you hold down Shift while you're holding on Control, you can get the mask to move. And to make things even more interesting, if we hold down Control to put it on mask mode, if we go to alpha, we can choose a shape within here. So if we hold down Control and drag that out, we get that shape here like this. So we could drag out like this, and that's going to mask it. Or we could take this, hold down Control, and then do the space bar, and we've got a mask here like that. Okay, so what I wanted to do is just kind of make this shape, and I know I went into a little bit of masking, but I think it's important for you to know that there's these different options for you that you can explore. So like I was saying, with this standard brush, I like to make the brush size pretty large, and I can just kind of tap in an area like this to kind of build it out a little bit. And then now I can hold down Shift and just kind of smooth the results of that and knock that back. And again, it is a little bit tough to get this shape really kind of nice and smooth at this subdivision level because the amount of polygons. So if I hit Shift D and drop it down, the mask will still hold. And now I can kind of pump this area up a little bit and just smooth it maybe just lightly tap on there. You can see I'm trying to get this line nice and kind of arcing right through here. Like that. Okay. And if I'm happy with that, then I can go ahead and hold down Control and just drag a marquee in the open viewport. I'm going to take it off this alpha here. And you can see I can kind of hold down Shift and just smooth out the results a little bit. So this could segue nice into the Move Brush right here, because really I need to take this surface and just click and drag it out a little bit. So the Move Brush is pretty nice for this, and you can see depending on your brush size, what do I want to move? You know, like what kind of detail am I trying to push with that thing? If I'm trying to do just small, minute changes, then I can just make the brush size smaller like that. Or if I want to do some really large and more proportional changes, then I can make my brush size nice and large like this, and then start really kind of tweaking these shapes out like this. And the Move Brush does work in conjunction with the masking. So if I hold down Control, I'm still on the Move Brush. And so just like the smooth functionality, with any of the brushes you hold down Control, and it will turn the brush temporarily into a brush that will do masking for you, like this. So here's where this comes in handy. You can kind of paint in a mask like this, right? And I'm going to work my way around here. I hit undo there and just accidentally drug that in the viewport. Then I can go to the side and remember that functionality of holding down Control and dragging out in the viewport. So now I'm able to mask the whole bottom portion of this thing. So I just, quickly mask this thing up and then finished out the part. I don't want to sit there and draw the mask down there, so I just use this to add to that. And if I want to take away, if you want to draw away some of the mask, you can hold down Control and Alt, and you can remove part of the mask like this. Okay, and I'm almost there for what I'm trying to do. So now I've got the whole body kind of masked off, and now I want to use this Move Brush. I'll tap S and make my brush size really large, and now I can really start tweaking on the shape of this and don't have to worry too much about what's going on with the body. So maybe I wanted to preserve the shape of the neck and everything else like that. I can start really kind of pushing this thing around. Pull this in. Oops. So as I rotate around, if I hold down Shift, it'll constrain it and snap those views from a front to a side to a back. So if you're wondering what's going on with the camera, that's kind of what's going on there. So I want to smooth out this mask, so I can hold down Control, click on it, it'll smooth it out. Go here like this. And smooth this out a bit. And you can see I've got, when I pulled this side here with the move, the brush was kind of small, so it made this little indent in the head. So I got to pull that out a little bit. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind, and then you can just kind of smooth out the results as you're done with that. And as I keep working, I might want to dig into certain places. So this will segue pretty nicely into the Damien standard brush. So if we go ahead and click on that, this brush is really nice for if you've got the brush pretty large, it kind of really cuts or carves in a shape into something like this. And then if you have a lot of polygons, it does a really nice job of doing really fine wrinkles and things. So I find a lot of use with this brush, especially when I'm trying to just kind of rough out certain shapes. So I think in the video I kind of did something somewhat like this. And if you want to use the opposite of this, you can see the alpha on this is going from really soft and then it pulls up into a point. So if we do the opposite of this, it'll really do a nice crisp line we've got here. So let's see, here's our next subdivision level up, so you can see what's going on geometry wise. So I'm holding down Alt, so I'm doing the opposite effect on here, and you can see it builds up this really nice crisp kind of line for you. And if I feel like I'm done with the mask thing at this point, I can just hold down Control, drag in the open viewport, get rid of it. And you can see I had some mask stuff turned on, and you can see some of that showing up in the higher subdivision level. It's no big deal. We can just kind of smooth that out just a little bit. And so I'm still on this Damien standard brush, and I'm kind of digging out with this. And I'm being pretty light with how hard I'm pressing on the model here. So here's something I could take out a cavity, so we could sculpt this thing out like this pretty easily and smooth some of that. And if you want to build the ridge up, I'm holding down Alt to do the opposite of that at this point. So it's pretty easy to get certain shapes like this. I'm going to carve in here and then build up and then smooth that stuff out. So again, the way I feel about the digital sculpting thing, I mean, everybody's going to be different, but I just really like to kind of sculpt things and then kind of smooth it back and start to see what kind of shapes I'm getting from this. If I want to build a ridge like this, I'm just holding down Alt. And this could have been a case where the masking will come in quite handy. So like you can see back here, if I hold down Control and then just try to do some kind of sphere shape like that and hit Control I for the inverse, put on the standard brush, make it really large, and hold down Alt to dig in, you can just build that shape up real quick like that. So we've just already put a hole in the back portion of that. And then using the move brush, pull this out some more. Alright, so let's take a look at the H polish, which does kind of what it sounds like. It's going to help polish the surface and get it kind of more smoothed out. So you can see I'm going to kind of flatten some of this area out. And this can kind of help if your geometry becomes kind of lumpy and you want it to look a little more mechanical or a little more smooth, like say you're doing like stylized kind of cartoon kind of stuff. This can kind of help smooth out the model and still build up edges. You can see how if I sculpt up to like an edge, it kind of smooths out the surface but then tightens up those edges along here. And then you can just smooth out any kind of results that maybe you're not happy with. And polish is pretty much the same. It's just got a little bit of different behavior to it. So I don't think it really pays attention to like some of these edges so much, but it is just kind of really kind of averaging out the surface and kind of smoothing that stuff for you. Okay, and then I'm going to hold down Shift and then smooth this out a little bit too. So anytime you see my brush up here change, you're going to know I'm probably holding down Shift to do that. Then we've got the Inflate Brush, which will just kind of, like imagine if this was a balloon type of surface, and you can kind of blow that up. Say we want this bridge up here to kind of grow. We can do that. The only thing is with the inflate that you have to be a little bit careful with. Say we make the brush size really large and we got a shape like this and we do inflate. You see how it does that? It kind of takes the surfaces and runs them together, which can be pretty cool, but if you go to bake out a normal map or some things like that later on, that can be problematic. So it's just something to keep in mind that you, depending on what you're doing a little later, you just want to be a little bit careful about how much you intersect surfaces with each other like that. Then the rake brush, this is going to give you definitely a more of a kind of traditional kind of clay look. And I'm going to take my intensity. That's something I need to tell you about the Z intensity. This is how strong your brush is. So obviously if you got a pen tablet, you're able to draw strokes and control how hard or light that you're sculpting with like that. And that's coming from the Z intensity. Now it is possible that you can drag this thing down. So if I put it on 5, you can see I can push as hard as I want, and it's only going to build up so much. If I take that down even lower, got something like this. And it's going to be even less. So we can get to this slider just like we can the brush size. So if you tap S, you got the slider for size. If you tap U, you get the slider for intensity. So at any point with those hotkeys, you can just tap on that stuff. And like I was saying, this does give you a more of a feel of when you're doing traditional sculpting, you'll use a piece of metal that might have grooves in it, or a piece of wood that has grooves in it, and kind of run it along the surface like this, and it kind of helps you roughly break down surfaces and kind of get them more even. At least it distributes the clay a little more evenly. So you could do the same thing digitally. You could, take this shape like this with the rake brush, and you could start to smooth this stuff out and knock away the surface like that. But really, I wouldn't use that brush like that in the computer. I know it works in the real world that way, and it works rather well. But in the computer, it just seems like it's making more work for me. Like I said, I think this works pretty good if you want to have your piece have some of that feel that maybe it's an unfinished traditional sculpt. That's why you'd want to kind of add some of these lines in here. But you can also do stuff like, you can see if I draw this on here and smooth it out, it does have the illusion or the appearance of maybe wrinkled skin or something like that. So there are some things you could do with it that I think might give you the right textural quality that you might be kind of going for. And the Morph Brush, that thing is more of a technical thing. You can go to a surface as long as you don't change the poly count and things like that. There is under the tool section, there's Morph Target, and you can say store Morph Target. And then now if we take our move brush and we do some big changes to this guy, like this, I'll make his head really small, move it back, so it's pretty easy to see what's going on here. If we put on the Morph Brush, you saw that we stored a Morph Target before we started sculpting these additional changes. So now I can take the Morph Brush and actually kind of do a difference between the old spot and then this new spot. So, say I was trying to get some of that old head position back, and with the back of the head, we wanted it over there, and maybe we wanted some of the stomach. You can kind of mix those two sculpts together with the brush. Now this one, I wish it had, if you held down Alt, it would kind of go back to the other state, but it just doesn't work that way. So that's kind of what the Morph Brush is all about. And then last one we're going to look at is this Trim Dynamic, which is something I really, really enjoy. So this one will, if you just click and drag, depending on the orientation of your brush, as you move it around, you can see like here, it's going to flatten out the surface based off of that orientation. So this one is really nice for building up kind of hard edges, things like that. So you can see I've already got kind of a hard edge going on here, but this thing makes it real easy to kind of draw along here, and I am drawing a little bit lightly. as I move around. I can really build up those edges. So I'll do this one here too, like this. And I can even flatten in this area for the shape here. And also, you know, depending on your brush size is going to have an effect on it, just like any other brush. So if I click on here and drag, you can see how I'm really starting to define out some of these hard edges that you see through here. Okay, so basically these combination of brushes, using this along with the mask and the poly groups that we had set up earlier. So I'm just holding down Control and Shift and then selecting on that area. So remember, if we need to get down in through here and kind of dig that out, it's possible for us to do. So I'll do inverse of this. Oops, hit the wrong key. Inverse of this. And I'm not really too happy with that shape, so I'll keep holding down Control and drawing that mask to refine it a little bit more. And holding Control and Alt. And put it on the move brush, make it pretty big, and just pull that thing down like that. So we're building some kind of shape for the inside of the mouth. But you really are going to have to take some time with these different brushes and see which ones you kind of gravitate towards. Like I said, I use the standard brush a lot for sculpting at the very beginning, but then now I kind of really shy away from that brush. The other one that I like a lot, I'm not sure if I hit that one, and I don't think I did, was the clay tubes. So this one really has the feeling of taking clay strips in the real world and just kind of laying that down. So you can see pretty quickly with this brush, I really love this brush, the way that it builds up, but it kind of flattens a surface all at the same time as it builds. I just can get some really cool shapes with this brush. So, you know, it might be a matter of taking that brush and roughing out certain shapes, and then I like to take the Damien standard brush after maybe using that, just kind of hitting it. And this does have the lazy mouse on there, so I can take the lazy radius. So again, if I wanted to be really specific about hitting these certain lines, if I use the lazy mouse and crank up the radius a little bit, it's going to make it a little bit easier to hit that stuff. Like this. So you can see in my time-lapse video where I'm sculpting, I really am using a combination of all these different brushes and these different techniques to kind of build up the look of the character that I'm doing and the character that I'm building. And it's just you're gonna have to just get familiar with each one of these, how intense the brush needs to be. So if you're using any of the brushes and you don't see the kind of behavior that you see whenever I'm sculpting with it, you're probably either being too light with your pressure or you're being too heavy with it. And then if you're having trouble controlling that, then you really need to change something about your Z intensity on your brush, and that will help out quite a bit. So the other thing that comes into play on all this is, I know I'm just showing you these brushes and these techniques for sculpting, but you know, you really have to have some kind of understanding of anatomy and everything else. And I know this is not looking like much of anything right now because I'm kind of just focused more on just showing you some of the functionality of this stuff. So these brushes alone and ZBrush or any program is not going to automatically help you make great art. What it is going to give you a tool set that you as an artist you need to develop, and these need to become your new brush sets, your new tools that you use to bring your ideas to life, right? So I would have to take this sculpt, and I would, if I was with this thing, I would drop this thing back down, and I'd probably get rid of all the high res portions of this thing. So I'd delete the higher. Then I would smooth this thing out because, like I was saying, it's really important for you to get the overall shape of this thing correct first, because you can see I started adding on some detail to this model, but it still, to be honest, it looked like not very good. So detail and all these fancy lines and everything else like that, it's not gonna make your sculpt. If you don't have the base of this thing done correctly, it doesn't matter what you add to it. It's not going to work out very well for you. It's just kind of like the building a house. You have to have that foundation there. There has to be something there that is working before you just start adding all these complex things to it. Because when you get done, you might just end up with a mess, and it might not work very well functionally. So my suggestion would be to spend a pretty good amount of time at the lower subdivision levels, at the lower stages, these earlier stages, and really kind of keep working with this geo to get it into a position or a place where you know that the proportions are starting to work and things like that. That things are actually starting to gel. Okay? Alright, I'm going to leave this video here and just let you take some of these things that I showed you with the brushes, try those out, and really kind of concentrate on making sure that you're building something that is working with good proportions and things like that.